I'm going to ask you to take your seats and we'll get started for the afternoon. How you doing, man? Getting any good things? Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Engages the brain, you know?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm hoping. All right. I find that after lunch, it's always a little harder than after breakfast. We're ready to go. Can you tell those people out there in the hallway to come on in? Okay. This afternoon, here's the agenda, just so that you know what's going to be happening. I don't want to surprise anybody. If you liked Dean and Dr. Bill, I can promise you that you'll like this afternoon. What Amy and Robert are going to do is take information from what was done this morning and give you practical applications using some of the practices that they have, which I think will be wonderful. But I'm looking for, so Amy Beamer Murray, are you here? Where are you? Right there. Amy, please stand up. Amy, meet Amy. It's their birthday today. They celebrate their birthday today. So I have no idea how old, and you don't ask that question, but I did want to tell you that. So I'm really, thank you for coming today, Amy, and thank you for coming today, Amy. I really appreciate it. That's a big deal. I'd like, you want to show the short video we have now? Okay.
These are roughly 28,835 jelly beans. I counted out 500 of them and used those to weigh the rest. In this pile, there's one jelly bean for each day that the average American will live. You might have more beans in your life, or maybe less, but on average, this is the time we have. Here's a single bean. It's your very first day. A special day, but kind of a rough day on everyone involved. Add 364 more and you have the first year of your life. Now, for a sense of scale, here are your first 15 years, 5,475 days, which brings us to the threshold of adulthood. And at that moment, this is the time that we have left. And this is, on average, what we will do with all that time. We will be asleep for a total of 8,477 days. If we're lucky, some of that time we'll be sleeping next to someone we love. We will be in the process of eating, drinking, or preparing food for 1,635 days. We'll be at work, hopefully doing something satisfying, for the equivalent of 3,202 of those days. 1,099 days will be spent commuting or traveling from one place to another, maybe a little bit more if you live in LA. On average, we will watch television in one form or another for a total of 2,676 days. Household activities, like chores and tending to our pets and shopping, will take another 1,576 days. And we will care for the needs and well-being of others, our friends and family, for 564 days. We'll spend 671 days bathing, grooming, and doing all other bathroom-related activities, and another 720 days will go to community activities, like religious and civic duties, charities, and taking classes. After we remove all those beans, this is what remains. This is the time that we have left. Time for laughing, swimming, making art, going on hikes, text messages, reading, checking Facebook, playing softball, maybe even teaching yourself how to play the guitar. So what are you going to do with this time? How much of it do you think you've already used up? If you only had half of it, what would you do differently? What about half of that? How much time have you already spent worrying instead of doing something that you love? What if you just had one more day? What are you going to do today?
Every day is precious, right? And we should not waste a moment of time. I've had the good fortune over the past at least 10 years of working with a fantastic company This company is HydroWorks. What they do is they make water therapy pools that have treadmills and a variety of things. And I'd like their CEO, Anson Flake, to talk to you about purpose.
Hi, everybody. Oh, I'm excited to be here today and talk about something that I'm incredibly passionate about, which is why we do what we do at HydroWorks. What you see on the screen here, this is our compass, and at the heart of this is our purpose, but I want to tell you a little bit about this compass first. On the right-hand side, we have our core values, and at the bottom, we have our 6 core business objectives for the year. And on the left-hand side, we have our marketing and brand promise. At the top is our vision. And our vision at HydroWorks is to touch 50,000 lives every day. We want 50,000 folks using our technology on a daily basis. We're at 30,600 today. But at the center of this compass that we have throughout our office is our purpose. We can zoom in on that. And our purpose at HydroWorks is to use water. And really what that means is innovate products that use water to heal and physically condition the world. Our mission, our purpose is to be a company that touches people throughout the world. Not just central Pennsylvania, but we want to be a worldwide business. And the best way that we found in our company to convey what we really stand for is to tell great stories. And Dean's here, and I think Dean Menudo would be, hey buddy, we've watched Dean a lot of times over the years, and he's had a huge impact on our company. And one thing we've learned from Dean is you've got to visually express what you're about often in order to bring it to life. So how do we bring our purpose to life at HydroWorks? Well, we tell these stories. And I brought 2 here today. They're really quick because I've got 5 minutes. All right, the first story is a story of Mo. And Mo's dream is to win a medal in the Olympics. That's what Mo's about. And he's using water as part of his training to get to the Olympics, and this is the outcome and the story of Mo.
The one main thing that I want to do with Mo is increase his mileage running on the HydroWorks. And he can run his normal 120 to 130 outside and do another 20 to 30 in the HydroWorks. I think that I can give him that extra strength from that miles with no risk whatsoever of injury. So in my mind, it's the safest and surest way to allow him to improve without any risk of injury. So this is going to be a big part of Mo's training while he's in the United States getting ready for the London Olympics.
Cherry's back to third. Rupp is fourth. And the home straightaway looms. Here's Mo Farah of Great Britain, leading Kenenisa Bekele and Galen Rupp into the home stretch. Bekele can't catch Farah. Here's the British crowd. He's riding it to the finish. Mo Farah and Galen Rupp, 1-2.
So that's Mo using HydroWorks technology to. He's the healthy guy in our purpose. He's the healthy one. But I brought another story, and this guy he's the healing side of our purpose. And what Brian wants to do is Brian had a terrible accident in gymnastics, and he broke his neck, and he's a quadriplegic. So what he wants to do is he just wants to stand up and possibly walk again. So here's Brian's story.
Ready? Oh my! That's right.
Aquatherapy is one of the greatest therapies that I can have. It's such a huge feeling of joy that I'm doing this, I'm standing up, I'm me again.
Would it be safe to say that in this moment you're happy?
I am definitely happy. Absolutely.
You know, not all of our stories are Extreme Makeover or the Olympics. You know, hardly any of them are. But what's important is for our people in our company is that we show them regularly, consistently, what we're about and what we're here for, and make sure that they're absorbing that information on a regular basis. And the best way we found to do it is have our compass, have it right there at the office, have it everywhere throughout the office, and second, tell a lot of great stories. So thank you for your time, and I'll answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thanks, Anson. I have to tell you that also in their compass, although they have clear financial goals and they want to achieve those, the big number that they're looking through is touching the 50,000 lives. And so it's a huge driver for the company. I've seen it over and over again, and I want to encourage you to think about that. Sarah, you want to help me out? By the way, for those of you who haven't met Sarah, this is who organized everything here, really did all the work. I just show up. So, Sarah, thanks. What we thought we would do is hand out the prizes right now, all except the Penn State Executive Education Prize, and that will be at 4 o'clock. We'd like you to stick around for that, but we thought it'd be good to go now to get all these things done. So we have Vistage 90-day membership, and we picked the names already and wrote them here so we could make this fast. Eddie McFarland. You're going to hand it off? Okay. Wireless Bluetooth speaker, Joe Braun. Joe's here. We have a couple of coaching sessions. These are outlined at the back. The time is there. One coaching session is for Gary Gilden. Gary happens to be the dean of the Dickinson Law School, so whoever's going to do that coaching session, be ready. Another coaching session is for Rick Secco, C-E-C-C-O. So from, and then what else did we have there? Okay, double-sided. So the complimentary ticket to see Damon John in Hershey at the annual spring gathering for Harrisburg Regional Chamber in Creedic is Brian Floyd. Brian, are you still here? Yep. It's these double-sided things. And another coaching session is Cindy Tolsma from Dasher. And the last coaching session is, there's Cindy, is John Gribble. John, are you here? Okay. Oh, I do? Hold on. Sarah has to keep me straight. Is it on the back? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Another Vistage 90-day membership is Jeff Metzler. So, okay, thanks, Sarah. Earlier this year, I happened to go to Vistage has an annual conference in California. Rick, you were there, right? And a number of other Vistage chairs were there. At that conference, I got to see the Search Inside Yourself Leadership, an abbreviated program. And Amy will attest to this, that I accosted her in the hallway and said, how do I get that program for this event? And we began to put it together, and I can't wait for them to present to you. The Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute was the most requested leadership program at Google, and what they've done is started a not-for-profit that they're now taking this across the United States. So we have Amy and Robert to do. Amy, you guys ready?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. Oh, there you are. Thanks. Okay. All right.
Great.
Please welcome.
Great. Well, thank you, John. This has been such a pleasure. Thank you, John and Sarah and everyone who put this together, and to Dean and Dr. Bill for really setting up what is an opportunity for Robert and me to now help you bring some of these teachings into practice so that you can experience it for yourself. In the same way that John met me in LA, where I live, teaching Search Inside Yourself, a similar version that we'll be doing today, I met Robert a couple years ago. We were part of the first cohort of people who were actually taking Search Inside Yourself out of Google and into the world. So there were 30 of us in this first cohort. I served as a mentor for the class last year, and I'm just delighted to bring Robert with me to teach as well. So Robert, do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. You there? Hello? Can you hear me? Yes? No?
Do you want to use the mic?
Hello? Oh, here comes Kyle.
Here comes Kyle. In the meantime, I can share a little bit about my journey, which is that for about 20 years, I've been practicing meditation on and off, and I would say more off than on. I knew intellectually how valuable it was. For example, when there's a really loud noise in your ear, it can be really challenging. So how do we work with that? Thank you for giving me that. This is what co-teachers do. They give you really good tests. And it wasn't until, has anyone worked on an IT project? Anyone? We called ourselves Team Sisyphus, if you know that story, where you roll the boulder up the hill, and you're, this was great. And then the next one, wait, why is the boulder back here? And so I found myself really kind of anxious and stressed, and I had gone to Harvard a few times. I hadn't learned how to deal with it. I even went to film school, went to bartender school. You'd think that would have helped, but it was really these teachings, and I love the work that has been done out of Google, and it's really a great way to bring these teachings with the neuroscience into the business world. So I'm really passionate to share this with you. It's been a delight sharing it with a lot of the Vistage members. And now over to Robert and your journey.
So I'm a lawyer. Hi, Dickinson. And I'm a former Wall Street executive. And I've also separately been a mindfulness teacher for 30 years. And about 10 years ago, I decided, okay, time to bring my worlds together, time to start teaching mindfulness in the business world. And I was doing that for a while, and then I came across Search Inside Yourself about 4 years ago, and I read the book, and I thought this is a really fantastic framework for how to teach mindfulness and emotional intelligence in business. So I signed up and met Amy, and here we are.
And here we are, great. So in an ideal world, we'd be able to have these one-on-one conversations that Dean talked about, but given the big size of the group, let's just get a sense of who's in the room. So how many of you had to drive, say, less than 5 miles to get here? Oh, how about 20 miles? So that's kind of the bulk. How about more than 100 miles? Okay, I flew 3,000 miles, so anyone? But this gives a sense, and I've been asking a little bit about, the most important thing in Harrisburg, which apparently is not registering voters, but perhaps football, as we saw with that video from Dean. So I'm trying to just understand, because it's a little confusing to me, because I'm from Boston, and my allegiance is very clear, even though I live in LA, Patriots, Red Sox, et cetera. But Ravens, who are Ravens people? No. Steelers? Yeah. Eagles? Okay, and then the Redskins, is that the other? No, okay. So am I missing anything? What else do we have? So this is good. There's diversity. There might be some conflicting belief systems in this group. Is that what we're understanding? Might not want to hear what the other person has to say. Who's a family business? Any family business? Okay, well, we're going to do a separate session for you guys, right? Because that's a whole other. Entrepreneurs? And how about you guys working on, maybe a company less than 50? Small company? And then how about more than 250 employees? Okay, great. And then finally, do any of you have a meditation practice of any sort? Okay, great,
Good.
Great. And have any of you heard of Search Inside Yourself or read the book prior to this? Great, a couple of you. Well, that's really helpful. And it's always good to just get a sense of who's in the room. And then for those of you, who's a control freak? Anyone here like that? All right, great. So this is going to really push you to the limit. As a favor to you, I have put together with Robert, we're just going to give you a little overview just to sort of like calm the nervous system, like, okay, with the, meditation, I don't know what's going on. This is an outline of the roadmap that in the Search Inside Yourself program, which is a 2-day full program. We're giving you just a couple hours. But we talk about how to optimize your life using mindfulness and neuroscience-based practices, and how mindfulness can actually enable emotional intelligence. So we are pretty familiar now with the value of emotional intelligence, right? So we haven't talked about it a lot because there's been a lot of discussion. Dan Goleman, who's credited with being sort of the father of emotional intelligence, was actually involved with the Search Inside Yourself framework. But what's the point? What are we driving towards? Well, we're driving towards outstanding performance, better leadership skills. We all want some of that. And then this idea of well-being, right? And I was really touched by, was it Anson who just spoke about those two kinds of people he serves? One is, I'm doing really well, but I want to take my game to the next level, right? I want to get to the Olympics. So we can sort of optimize on that. And then the other is anxiety or stress or insomnia or some of these issues that, all those stresses that Dr. Bill Crawford walked us through that are really weighing us down. And so we can really work on both sides of that coin. Underneath emotional intelligence, self-awareness, how do we manage difficult emotions, how are we motivated, empathy, and leadership. We won't be able to get into all of that today, but I think it's useful just to have a framework of when we say emotional intelligence, what is this? And what we'll be doing is really giving you practices so that you can bring this into your day. So with that, I have an important secret. You guys are actually leading this class, okay? How many of you are leaders here? I mean, we're all leaders here, right? We're all leaders. And so you are the best sort of research lab into what's going on. So we want to invite you to split into pairs. This is going to be the hardest part of your time together. You can just turn to your neighbor. If you are not having a partner, just raise a hand and find someone else. And we're going to ask you to talk about two questions. What do you appreciate about your work? And what are some of the challenges? So what do you appreciate, dare I say, love about your work? What are the challenges? We'll give you about 5 minutes. And if you don't have a partner, you can raise your hand and find one. What do you want to say?
Vegas rules.
And just a reminder, what happens in Harrisburg or Cumberland stays here. Okay.
I might speak a little bit about how this was developed at Google and why it's called Search Inside Yourself. We're going to do popcorn after this?
No, I don't know if I'm muted or not.
Yeah, you are.
Okay. soon. Maybe 3:30, yeah. So are you ringing or am I?
What?
You're gonna ring?
I'll ring it.
Okay. Great. So, sounds like you guys have a lot to talk about. I'd love to hear about what's in the room. First of all, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Was it the picture of the face on that $50 bill, or what? What were the aspirations you have for your work? Yes, sir.
Both of us talked about our people and how we can develop them and help them achieve their dreams and really elevate them, whatever they want to do, whether it's continuing to work in an organization or move on and buy a business or whatever that might be.
Great. So really growing your people, helping your people advance can cause fulfillment. Beautiful. What else? Yes? Beautiful. So we're in a conference dedicated to purpose, and so that sense we're doing something larger than ourselves. Wonderful. How about in the back of the room there? Yes, sir.
I've just got 3 new friends who are working in the dry cleaning business, family business. Part of what they appreciate is they're honoring the family legacy by continuing to run their company well and serve the clients and their employees.
That's beautiful. So family business and honoring legacy. So there's something about history and innovation and really moving that forward through values. Thank you. Are we missing any big one that's like a burning? Yes.
Well, the former lawyer in me takes appreciate, and what I appreciate about my work is my life schedule. I appreciate my life because of my work now. But what I love about my work is that I help other people become the best version of themselves. So I took appreciate very literally, and what I'm grateful for, what I appreciate about what I do, is that what I love is serving.
Beautiful. And there can be levels of how we appreciate. And just that jelly bean video I thought was really evocative. What's going to give us meaning in those jelly beans? So there's no challenges, right? Should we just move on to the, it's all, no, okay. What's making you laugh? What's a big challenge for you?
I think some of the challenges are also the people. Some of the people are a challenge.
Why don't they just do what we tell them? It would be so easy. We want to grow them, but then they don't listen. Yeah. So, and we saw in Bill's presentation, Dr. Bill's presentation, that it's these darn people. If they just would listen to us, things would be a lot smoother. Yeah. So isn't that interesting how often our challenges are very much our growth point too? What else? Maybe 1 or 2 challenges. Yes?
Things that are out of our control.
Out of control. Oh, yeah, how many, well, the control freak ratio, just so we know, because mindfulness, again, did I warn you? This is going to really, you guys getting ready? You sort of grabbing the edges like the turbulence in the flight and the palms are getting a little sweaty? Yeah. So we live in, who's heard the term VUCA? It's a term from the military, but we're living in a VUCA world, which means that it's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. And for those of us who are in business and like plans and like outcomes and have shareholders and have meetings and strategies, this is not a comfortable place to be. And this is another source of the stress we face. And time. Who just has so much time, we just don't know what to do. So, and our technology. So there's a lot of challenges that we're all facing. And we're going to share with you some practices that can maybe not give you more time, but use your time more effectively.
So a little deep background. This course was developed at Google, and that's why it's called Search Inside Yourself. It's a bit of a joke. And it was developed by a guy called Chade-Meng Tan, and he was Google employee number 107. So he got very wealthy. And in the early days, Google allowed people to take 20% of their time and do whatever they wanted. So some people made video games, and some people did coding for fun. And Meng was a mindfulness practitioner, and he said, I want to develop a program where even Google engineers can understand why mindfulness is good for them. So the outcome was this. He worked with, as Amy mentioned, Dan Goleman. He worked with some neuroscientists from Stanford. He worked with some expert meditators, and this program came out. So let's look at a few studies. Study number 1 at Harvard. 300 executives were randomly pinged at various times, and the question was, are you paying attention to what you want to be paying attention to? 47% of the time, the answer was no. Does this sound familiar to anyone? No, nobody's going to admit this, right? Sounds familiar to me. How many people have a hard time paying attention in meetings? Anybody? Okay, different study. 70% of leaders report that they're regularly unable to be attentive in meetings. And I'm wondering if that's a little low because it's a self-report. 2% of leaders regularly make time to enhance their personal productivity. Now, you guys are in the 2% right now because you're all leaders and you're making the time to enhance your personal productivity. The rest of everybody in the Harrisburg area probably isn't. So what do we do? Well, before we get to that, here's another study. This was a study done at Google. And the question for the Human Resources Department there was, how do we know what makes an effective team? How do we know what the elements are for our most effective teams versus our least effective teams? So they did a study, and before they got the results of the study, the Human Resources Department said, well, here's what we think it's going to be. We think it's a question of who's on the team. So if you have a couple of PhDs and a couple of expert coders and a hacker and a Rhodes Scholar and one administrator to herd all the cats, that's probably a great team. And when they got the results, they were completely wrong. The number 1 attributes of effective teams at Google. Anyone who want to take a guess? Diversity? Any other guesses? Shared purpose. Psychological safety. Psychological safety. Not being afraid or embarrassed to take a risk in the group. Not being afraid to say what's on your mind. Not being afraid to confront somebody without fear of being fired or having a job problem. So going back to the first study, how do we get from 47% of the time mind wandering maybe down to 35? Wouldn't that be great if we could lower our incidence of mind wandering? And how do we remember to be safe for ourselves and for other people? Because if we want our teams to be effective, we have to create a safe space. So the answer is we train our attention. We train our ability to pay attention. So it's well known in the scientific community that how we pay attention and to what we pay attention affects how we think and see and make sense of the world. And the way we train attention is through a process called mindfulness. Mindfulness is both the practice that we do, and it's the result. We become more mindful. We become more attentive. So it's nothing that's exotic. It's nothing that's abnormal. Who here has heard of mindfulness? Okay, a lot of people, great. So let's do a 1-minute practice of mindfulness, and we'll see a little bit about what it is. So just sit up comfortably in your chair. And just take a breath. Just breathe. Just pay attention to your breathing. Are you noticing your breath? Can you feel your breath right now? How do you know you're breathing? Did anybody notice anything different? Do you feel different now than you did a minute ago? What's the difference? More relaxed? More aware? Anybody else feel any different? This is a rough crowd. Okay, so at least you noticed the difference. Yes, sir?
Just the whole room got quiet.
The room got quiet, yep. So a question yes, sir?
Actually, the room got more noisy for me. I started to hear all the little things that were going on.
That's interesting. You started to hear and feel all the little noises in the room. So the question we're going to explore for the next couple of hours is how might we feel and act differently if we become more aware of what's going on inside us and of our surroundings. So this is a very partial list of some organizations that have mindfulness practices for their employees. In fact, I read in Forbes a couple of weeks ago that 22% of American companies have mindfulness programs. That seems a little high to me, but sounds really good.
Well, thank you. And you know, we talk about the benefits of mindfulness. Really, there's 3 that we focus on. If you're fully present on the job, you're going to be more effective. We all want to be more effective as a leader. You'll make better decisions, and you're going to work better with those other people, those people that might not always agree with us, right? So, better leader, more effective, work better with other people. And this quote is from Bill George. Have any of you heard of Bill George? So if you're interested in leadership development, mindfulness, emotional intelligence, he's a great guy to follow. He was CEO of a company called Medtronic, and he's on the faculty at Harvard Business School. And I graduated from Harvard Business School 20 years ago, and when I was there, I was like sort of the wacky woo-woo yoga meditator, and I came back 20 years later, and the whole time was about mindfulness, emotional intelligence. If anyone reads the Harvard Business Review, you can't open it without an article about how mindfulness helps lawyers and consultants and bankers in developing strategy and the research and the studies. And it was, for me, it was incredibly validating. I put this up not because this is a good selfie, but because it's just amazing in 20 years what has happened with how much research is out there about mindfulness and how really every business leader needs to know this is happening, because this is really a movement in the business community that can help you be more effective as a leader and as a person. I do want to, while we're talking about selfies, anyone have one of these? So we're just in a ground rule being mindful about that, but I just thought it'd be kind of fun. You know, I don't come to Harrisburg. Can we just do like a little, okay, great, it's sort of like the Emmys and the, thank you. And then we talk, who's heard of Vegas rules? Right, so what happens here at the Clarion stays at the Clarion, right, when we have these conversations. And then I want to invite you to explore a concept of beginner's mind. Anyone know that term, beginner's mind? Anyone back, besides my friends back here, beginner's mind? All right, would you like to explain a little bit about that?
Sure, it's being a kid in kindergarten.
Beautifully put. So being a kid, being open to what's possible, and you mentioned a couple words, judge and filters. And part of what gets us to become leaders is that we've seen so much. We're making decisions all the time. The challenge is that starts to really narrow our view and limit the possibilities we can take, right? Because I've seen this before, oh, that's not how we do it here, right? And as a leader, it becomes increasingly challenging to have that beginner's mind, be open to the possible. So even for the next couple hours, can you stay in that state of beginner's mind, which is actually what we're cultivating through meditation. And then just, be curious, have fun, be skeptical. Again, be your own lab. We'll give you a few different practices. And with that, would you like to give another definition of what mindfulness is?
So this is a formal definition from a guy called Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who's a doctor at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. And his definition is the awareness that arises from intentionally paying attention in the present, non-judgmentally. So let's work out what that means. So why don't you take a look at the back of your hand? Just pick up your hand and look at your hand. So you're intentionally paying attention to the back of your hand because I asked you to. You're doing it in the present. And what that means is you're just looking at your hand now. You're not thinking about the future. You're not thinking about the past. It's simply the hand right now. Now, non-judgmentally is the hard part. So I'm looking at my hand and I'm thinking, oh, I'm not as young as I used to be. I really could probably use some hand cream and maybe a manicure and blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of blah, blah, blah that's going on. So when I notice that I'm judging, I simply let go of the thought process. I let go of the story I'm telling myself about, I'm just looking at my hand. I'm not thinking about my imminent death, So that comes up and I let go of the story and just come back to looking at the hand. So the question for you is, can you just look at the back of your hand? Very simply, no judgment. So that's another definition of mindfulness. And I think we're going to see a video now.
We're going to see a video. Before we see the video, were you guys all here with the conversation around, what do you do in traffic and someone cuts you off? And then there was a suggestion, how would your kids respond? We didn't know that question was going to come up, but I think this video might be a good illustration of really what is mindfulness. Also to Dean's video.
You may have heard this word mindfulness. It's become something of a buzz phrase of late. I'm going to give you one simple, serviceable definition, which is this. Mindfulness is the ability to know what's happening in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. Imagine how useful this could be. Just as an example, you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off in traffic. How do you normally react? I think most of us, we normally react by having a thought, which is, I'm pissed. And then what happens next? You immediately, habitually, reflexively inhabit that thought. You actually become pissed. There's no buffer between the stimulus and your reaction. With just a little bit of mindfulness, in that same situation, you might notice my chest is buzzing, my ears are turning red, I'm having a starburst of self-righteous thoughts, I'm getting angry. But you don't necessarily have to act on it and chase that person down the road, screaming at them with your kids in the back of the car thinking you've gone nuts. Now, you might be thinking, don't I need to get angry sometimes? Aren't I justified? I would say yes, but probably not as much as you think. The proposition here is not that you should be rendered by mindfulness into some lifeless, non-judgmental blob. The proposition is that you should learn how to respond wisely to things that happen to you, rather than just reacting blindly. And that, my friends, is a superpower. How do you get it? The way to get it is through meditation. I believe that meditation and mindfulness are the next big public health revolution. In the 1940s, if you told somebody you were going running, they would have said, who's chasing you? But then what happened next? The scientists swooped in, they showed that physical exercise is really good for you, and now all of us do it, and if we don't, we feel guilty about it. And that's where I think we're headed with mindfulness and meditation. It's going to join the pantheon of no-brainers like brushing your teeth, eating well, and taking the meds your doctor prescribed for you. Let me just close by saying, mindfulness is not going to solve all of your problems. It's not going to render your life a nonstop parade of unicorns and rainbows. Nonetheless, this is a superpower, and one that is accessible by you immediately.
So that was, Dan Harris of ABC News. And he wrote a book called 10% Happier, which you may want to pick up. And his story is he had a panic attack on the air. If you look in YouTube, you can see it. And he actually shows it whenever he gives a talk. He's kind of proud of the panic attack. But then what he did was he started to practice mindfulness afterwards. And I think his panic attacks have gone significantly down. And he's written a book about his journey from being a cynical reporter to being a cynical meditation practitioner. Okay, so how does this work? So until about 20 years ago, scientists thought that the human brain doesn't change after adolescence. So it grows as you're a child, then you become an adolescent, and maybe it stops growing when you're about 18 or 20, and then maybe it deteriorates in old age. That's actually wrong. There's a new science called neuroplasticity, which has arisen in the past 20 years. And the basic tenet of neuroplasticity is that depending on what you pay attention to changes the structure and function of your brain. So it changes the physical structure, and it changes how your brain actually works. There have been enormous amount of studies in the past 15 years about the effects of mindfulness. And I was noting when Dr. Bill was, forget your name, you're up at the board writing down the highest purpose. And these are all emotional intelligence qualities: compassionate, patient, thoughtful, generous, etc., sincere and authentic. So what the studies have shown, among other things, is that mindfulness practice tends to lower stress and anxiety, tends to increase our ability to focus and increase our ability to perceive clearly, and it increases our overall health and well-being. And those are the precursors or the necessary aspects of how we can actually become more compassionate, patient, generous, and clear. So here's the money quote, again from the Harvard Business Review, from some scientists who wrote this article in the Business Review. And what they said, they did a survey of the scientific literature, and their conclusion was mindfulness should no longer be considered a nice-to-have for executives. It's a must-have. It's a way to keep our brains healthy, to support self-regulation or self-management, and we're going to talk about that, and effective decision-making capabilities, and to protect ourselves from toxic stress. This is all from the scientific literature.
Great, thank you. And you know, we talk about sort of giving you that visual image. What's actually happening in your brain when you're meditating? Even just that minute exercise Robert did earlier, some of you felt the calmness, that peacefulness. You can actually think about your mind as a snow globe. Now, it was April Fool's Day, 1997. There was a foot of snow in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I decided that was when I was moving to Los Angeles. I've been in Southern California for about 20 years, so it's really hard to get a snow globe that was, it has a palm tree and it's really small, so you might not be able to see it. But our mind really is like this snow globe, and there's just this, all the snow, the thoughts and the emails and the shopping lists and the past and the future and the kids and the guy that cut you off in the car that Dr. Bill, we were taking it all day. And this is swirling around us all day. That's, half the time our mind is wandering. And so what happens when we're practicing mindfulness is that it allows the mind to settle. And that gives us calmness, clarity, And then when the mind is like this snow globe, it's really amazing what happens when you think about that kid with that open possibility. Have you ever seen a 2-year-old that's just looking at everything through the world, and it's just that clarity of mind, and there's that happiness. It's really our default nature. And so picking up on that search inside yourself and using the word optimize, right? Because those of you that know about search engine optimization, we're optimizing our lives. We actually don't need to search outside ourselves for this. And so yes, we want better performance. Yes, we want calmness and patience. But those jelly beans, this is really how we can get to those jelly beans having a little more happiness there. So just planting that seed. Now let's talk about, okay, I don't know about you guys, for those of you who have an analytical mind, okay, this is all great, how do I do it? Let's get into sort of the nitty gritty. Enough already, let's get to it. I'm gonna start with a caveat that this is actually really simple. It doesn't mean it's easy. And I've had my own fits and starts with the practice and now have a very disciplined practice. But the more we understand actually what's happening in the mind, can find it very useful. So first, we start an intention for our practice. And we have this wonderful list of intentions here. Maybe I want to decrease stress. Maybe I want to be a little more patient. We set an intention for our practice. And even just setting an intention, if you do nothing else, can really be quite powerful. So just taking that away. And then for the attention training practice we're going to focus on the breath. There's a lot of things you can focus on. You could focus on sound. You could focus on body sensations. For this exercise, we're going to follow our breath. Okay? Now, who's been to London? You guys know there's those guards there, and they stand there like this, and they're just noticing in and out. They're really not changing. They're just noticing. So that's what we're doing with the breath. We're just noticing the breath coming in and out. And this is really good. What happens? Well, we get distracted, right? Because 50% of the time we get distracted. Now, this is really, when you think about sort of the money quote, when you think about that, you go to the gym and you get your biceps. Usually what happens with the distraction, I suck at this, right? Like maybe mindfulness is really good for someone else, but my mind's really busy. So this isn't going to work for me. Okay, I'll just try something else. But the distraction is actually the great moment. The distraction is the moment for those of you who are athletes and go to the gym. This is actually where you're starting to train that muscle of attention. So the distraction is the opportunity. And what happens is we notice the distraction, we notice our attitude about the distraction, and then we return our attention to the breath. So in that moment, whenever you get that, that mind wandering, that email that you're actually like writing, I write a lot of emails in my head. Anyone else do that? They're really good, by the way, too, right? Once I notice it and I bring myself back, that's the muscle I'm strengthening, right? That's the neuroplasticity. That's the muscle I'm building. That's the opportunity. And then we return to our breath. Let me show you just a little bit of, again, we don't have to be neuroscientists by the end of the day, but I find it useful if we understand what's actually happening in the brain. There's actually different parts of the brain that are being activated. I don't know how well you can see all the names, but when we have that sustained attention, what's lit up is the prefrontal cortex. So we heard a lot about the neocortex, the newer, the more evolved part of the brain where we want to live when we're making decisions. The prefrontal cortex is the part that's sort of our executive function. It's probably the CEO of the brain, right? It's making decisions, it's problem solving. That's what we're building when we're in the sustained attention mode. But then we get that mind wandering. There's actually a whole network. It's called the default mode network, a whole network of other things that are lighting up. And the other reason why I find this so helpful is, for me, it takes away a lot of the kind of blame and shame that Dr. Bill was talking about earlier when we're like, oh, God, my mind's, I'm just not good at it. No, the mind is doing what the mind does. So we can let that go and just say, just notice that we're distracted. Now, the becoming aware of the distraction, this is, again, a chance to go to the gym. There's a part of the brain called the insula. Now, after lunch, after the break, we're going to do a little insula workout. So I hope you guys brought your insula workout clothes. You guys ready for that? Okay. And then there's another part, the anterior cingulate cortex. A lot of research has shown how that builds up in meditators. And then we go back, we reorient the attention back to the prefrontal cortex. So this is really building off of what we've learned this morning about that relationship, what's happening actually in that thinking brain. There's different parts. We're going to be building them up. Does that make sense? Okay. So our vision is really to give an exercise for this.
So just a few comments here. First is you can't do this wrong. So if you think you're doing it wrong, just let it go and come back to the breath. Because that's what we were talking about when we were talking about non-judgmentally. So whatever's going on is okay. There's no problem. You get distracted. The point is actually not to stay on the breath. The point is to notice when we're distracted and come back. As Amy said, that's what we're training. And the way we do that is with kindness to ourselves. If we're non-judgmental, that means we actually are allowed to be kind to ourselves. So whatever is going on, whatever kind of story you're telling yourself about how good you are or how bad you are or how good and bad other people are or how you feel, just let it go and very kindly just come back to yourself. So the operative attitude here is kindness, and you're not doing it wrong even if you only come back once when Amy tells you to.
Yeah. And it's great. I mean, it really bears repeating. I speak with a lot of Vistage groups and CEOs, and this is not typically how we got to the position that we got to by talking to ourselves kindly, right? This is actually another muscle that we're training. So I appreciate your bringing that up. Okay, so I'm going to sit here on this very regal chair, and one of the things you get questions about is posture, and does there need to be incense and robes and candles and all of that? And we don't need all of that, but it is helpful. And it is helpful to have a posture that actually sort of mimics what we're going for. And we're going for two things. We want to feel relaxed. We also want to feel alert. So as we're training our attention, we have this mountain up there because, how would a mountain feel if you can think of your favorite mountain, that idea of, sort of this powerful mountain. And you can put your feet on the ground. You can have your hands on your thighs or in your lap. It's really whatever's comfortable for you. And if you'd like, you can close your eyes, or you can have a soft gaze slightly downward. And allow your shoulders to drop. And you can imagine some sort of string pulling up your spine. So again, that relaxed and alert, really letting yourself settle into the chair. And let's connect first with your intention for doing this practice. Maybe it's to be a little less stressed. Maybe a little more patient. Maybe you just want to learn a little more about how your mind works. Whatever it might be, connecting to that intention now. And then letting that go. And bring your attention now to the breath. And just notice, where do I feel the breath most vividly? Maybe it's the air coming in the nostrils. Maybe it's the rise and fall of the chest or the belly. Wherever you feel the breath most vividly, allow your attention to rest there. Breathing in, breathing out. You might notice the air cooler on the inhale, warmer on the exhale. And if you notice sounds or distractions, that's fine. Just gently and kindly returning back to the breath. You might try counting each exhale from 1 to 10. And if you notice yourself wandering on the way to 10, that's fine as well. Just return to 1. And can you be curious and kind with yourself, even as you bring your attention back to the breath? Thoughts come, thoughts go. No need to chase away or run after. You can think of your breath as an anchor, a home base to rest your attention on. And so we'll stay in this place of making some effort to stay focused on the breath while allowing whatever comes up to arise for you. So just gently returning back to the room. You can stretch if you'd like. And let's spend a little time checking in with the group. Anyone fall asleep? Yeah, almost, right? Do you want to talk about that?
About falling asleep?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. There's two reasons people fall asleep. One is you're tired. That was easy, right?
Yeah.
Second is there's some of us, myself included, who have a particular neurotic style, I use that word loosely, of if something comes up that I don't want to deal with, I go to sleep. Or if my wife is telling me something that I don't want to hear, I change the subject without even knowing I've changed the subject because I just check out. So if you're not tired and you're falling asleep, it just might be something to look at.
Great, thank you. And again, it also can depend on your intention for the practice. So there are some practices, if you have an issue with sleeping, that can be quite useful to relax you before sleep. We were training our attention. So it's also after lunch, right? So, there's that too. What else? Did anyone notice any distractions or sounds? Sound of the air conditioner. And did you notice any response to that you had?
That I was aware of it, and then I remembered to go back to just concentrating on my breathing.
Great. What else? Back there, yes.
Question. Define a distraction a little better than you would. I know because my inclination is to think of a distraction as something negative. Start worrying about meeting my mind wandering positively, they can still be distractions from focusing on the breath.
Yeah, take that, and then if Robert has additional thoughts. It's a really great question because we spend so much of our time judging, and judging doesn't have to be always about negative. It can be, this is good, and this is bad, and this worked well, and this didn't work well, and we're just constantly telling a story. Our minds are story-making machines, and so whatever piece of information we have, we're going to decide, are we craving it, are we moving towards it, or are we pushing away for it? And so what we're doing in this practice is to really develop, if you've heard the phrase equanimity, which is an ability to really handle whatever's coming at us. And so we are aware that some things are, of course, who doesn't want ice cream, right? And who doesn't want to have the guy cutting us off in traffic, right? It's how we relate to these things. So for this practice, we're really training that muscle. It could be a lovely, sort of trip to Aruba, and it's so sunny and it's so beautiful. And then we bring ourselves back. And we're not, or it could be, this guy's a real jerk, and we bring ourselves back. So we're not kind of deciding one is good or bad. It's really, and I bring myself back. Both of those are distractions.
everything you said.
Okay.
And the point of the practice is to bring ourselves back to the present. And the way we do that is by noticing when we're not in the present. And the way we notice that is we're not paying attention to our breath. The breath is just a reference point because we're sitting down. The only thing that's happening is we're breathing. So we're using that as the reference point to see, am I present or am I not? So the content of what brings us away is sort of irrelevant. I mean, it feels better to have nice content than to be angry or fearful. But in either case, what we do with the content, with the story, is just gently let it go, kindly come back to the breath. And the point is, maybe we can go from 47% to 35% simply by developing this muscle which allows us to remember to come back. There's a word in Tibetan for this kind of meditation, and the translation of the word is recollection. So the practice is about remembering or recollecting to come back, as opposed to, being here. I mean, there's a lot of people have a misconception that we're trying to clear our thoughts, which we're not. We can't clear our mind. What we can do is be aware of it, and that's the muscle we're training.
Great. And I would add, I love this idea of remembering, and we just did a formal practice, but there's so many ways throughout the day to have an informal practice, which can really just be about remembering, just remembering to notice the breath, remembering to, maybe you're in a meeting and just feeling your feet on the ground, remembering to check in with your intention. It can just be as simple as going from doing something to being aware of, oh, I don't know how I got into this parking spot. Who was driving this car? Just being aware that our hands are on the wheel. Anything else? Okay.
Anybody recognize themselves in that? So one of the results of mindfulness practice is the development of emotional intelligence, as Amy mentioned. And the first aspect of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, and it serves as the basis for all the other elements, or all the other skills of emotional intelligence. And importantly, emotional intelligence is actually a skill we can train. It's not what we're born with and what we die with. This is about training ourselves to be more emotionally intelligent, to have higher EQ. And where we start is developing greater self-awareness. So what's self-awareness? Well, Dan Goleman defines it as knowing our resources, our preferences, our inner states, our intuitions. And knowing in the sense of being aware of and having clarity about what's going on with us. So what that leads us to is a bigger sense of self-awareness, which is not just necessarily awareness of what's going on a moment-to-moment basis, but awareness about what are our strengths, what are the places where we can develop ourselves, also known as possibly weaknesses, and how can we access the inner wisdom that we have. So the practice of mindfulness allows us to become more present, become more aware of what's going on inside us. And actually, self-awareness and mindfulness are pretty much the same thing, pretty much the same definition. What we're doing is we're developing clarity about our state of mind. So it's kind of like every time we practice, there's one more pixel goes on that inner camera of ours. So we go from being out of focus to being in focus. So we know what's happening. There's another way to understand what's going on inside us, and that's through awareness of our emotions. And what are emotions? Anybody want to offer a definition of an emotion? I know it when I see it, that kind of thing. I can't define it, but I know it when it happens. Okay, so here's a definition that may be a little bit surprising, which is that all emotions are physiological changes in our body. Emotions are body sensations. And then there's a story that we tell, and what the story does is it kind of solidifies the body sensation. It reinforces the body sensation. So to this end, there was a study in Finland that was released in 2014, and they took 700 subjects. And the subjects, there were 350 Northern Europeans and 350 East Asians. And they showed them various videos and photos and maybe recordings of different situations or different events which were meant to elicit a particular emotion. They showed it to all 700 of them, and they said, then they gave them silhouettes, like the police silhouettes, and said, color in this silhouette where you're feeling this feeling, where you're feeling this emotion. So here's what came out. The results were almost uniformly identical. So if we're feeling happy, it's in our head and our chest. The brighter the color, the more the feeling. The darker the color, the less the feeling. So envy is all in head and heart and really nothing else. And you can see for yourself. If you're depressed, maybe you can relate to that depression picture. The point is that we can actually know how we feel by figuring out what's going on in our body. If we, for example, if I'm feeling, I think it was Dan Harris's video, he was saying, well, I'm feeling flushed and I'm feeling a starburst of righteous anger. Well, that's not a feeling so much. It's an experience. But he was feeling difficulty in his chest. He said, I must be angry. How many of us are, feel how we feel, and then we shut down or we burst out, and we don't know what happened. We don't relate back to, well, there was this thing that happened, and then my body felt this way, and then I did that. So the point about this study and this chart is that it's actually possible by figuring out what's going on in your body to figure out what emotion am I actually feeling. So there's the movie. Yeah. There's a movie about how emotions affect our decisions. So the more we understand what emotions we're feeling, the more we can make effective decisions. And this is Dan Goleman. What do I do here? Just one more click. Okay.
The first two elements of emotional intelligence have to do with self-mastery. And they are based, this circuitry is the neural platform. The first of these is self-awareness, knowing what I'm feeling, knowing why I'm feeling it. Self-awareness is very important for decision-making, particularly personal decision-making, but also business or even technical decision-making for quite an interesting reason. There was a study done by a man named Antonio Damasio. He's now at USC. He's an expert on this circuitry. And because he's an expert on this circuitry, a very bright corporate lawyer who unfortunately had a prefrontal brain tumor, which was operated on quite successfully and early. But during the surgery, they snipped the connection between the amygdala and the PFC. This lawyer went to see Damasio because his life was collapsing. And Damasio tested him and couldn't see anything wrong. The lawyer's life had collapsed in this way. He seemed to be able to function just as well after surgery as before, but he couldn't keep his job. He lost his job, couldn't keep any job. His wife left him. He lost his house. He ended up living in his brother's spare bedroom. And in despair, he goes to Damasio. He says, well, you're an expert on this circuitry. Can you figure out What's wrong with me? Damasio gives him a battery of neuropsychological tests. Nothing wrong. Attention, memory, just as good as before surgery. IQ was very high still after surgery as it was before. But he couldn't keep a job. And then Damasio got a clue. He asked him this question: when should we have our next appointment? He realized that the lawyer could give him the rational pros and cons of every hour for the next 2 weeks, but he didn't know which was best. In other words, Damasio argues, when we have a thought, our emotional centers valence it for us. When we're making a decision, our emotional centers prioritize for us. He no longer had that ability. Damasio argues that in order to make a good decision, which strategy should we follow? Should our team go for plan A or plan B? How does this guy compare to the X other guys I've dated? Should I marry this guy or not? Should I leave this job for another? All of those decisions depend on our ability to draw on the wisdom of the emotions. And wisdom of emotions is not just a pretty phrase.
So we really like to include that video because really the key takeaway is that emotions, these physiological experiences, can actually help us make decisions, right? So that's really the key takeaway. He was able to have that connection snipped between what we heard about this morning, right? We heard about that, the limbic brain, the emotional brain, and the prefrontal cortex, which is part of the neocortex, the thinking brain. So these practices are actually helping the communication between those two parts of the brain. But there's something really interesting that's also going on here. And this is a study that it's called the Iowa Gambling Task. And people were given 2 decks of cards. They had a deck of red cards and they had a deck of blue cards. And the red cards were not the good deck of cards. You wanted the blue cards. The question is, how long is it going to take people to figure this out? So at around 50 cards, they had a hunch. They suspected that the blue cards were the good ones, the red cards were kind of the losers. And by 80, they totally figured out they could tell you exactly what was going on. But here's where this gets really interesting. They had hooked folks up to a lie detector, a polygraph test that would measure their stress response. And what they found, and this is just so cool to me, is that by 10, their palms were sweating, they were having a stress response, and their behavior was changing. They were actually choosing the blue cards. 40 cards before they had a sense that something was better about the blue cards. And so what we see is that our bodies are giving us information well before our thinking brain can figure out exactly what it is. And so the opportunity for us as leaders and as people driving cars and all just being in our lives is that can we get better visibility, that those pixels that Robert was talking about, can we have more information into what's going on? And this is the opportunity. Another way to think about it is typically we think, I'm angry. I'm driving the car, I'm angry, I'm depressed, I'm sad. It's existential. This is just who I am, not much I can do. Kind of similar to how we felt about the brains, that we can't really change anything, not very empowering. But when we realize that emotions are actually in the body, they're experiences that are happening. I'm experiencing anger in the body. I'm experiencing frustration in the body. That gives us a lot of opportunity. I know that Robert has a little, do you have a diet tip?
I have a diet tip.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we realize that my anger is a physiological sensation, we can look to maybe some other cultures to see what they think about the relationship between body states and the self. So if you, in English, we say, I'm hungry. I am hungry. I am hunger. There's nothing I can do about it, and I need to eat. In French, we say j'ai faim, which means I have hunger. So it's a little different. It's a little further away. It's kind of I have this thing that's going on in my body. So if we can actually relate to our hunger the same way we relate to our emotions, I'm experiencing this physiological sensation, it becomes a little bit easier to not take that cake.
And speaking of taking cake, this seems like a really good time for a break. If anyone has, does anyone have hunger? Or have a desire to stand up? So do we want to, John, do you want to do 15 minutes, or is it 15 minutes? So it's 2:23, so 2:38. We'll be back in 15 minutes.